believe that they gave me a raw deal because this industry is a monster.
Did Dave Chappelle say too much? Hollywood tried to break this man when they realized they couldn't control him. But if what Joe Rogan exposed here is actually true, I don't think most people realize the monster that Dave Chappelle was really fighting. Subscribe to Elites Exposed for more, and tell me if you read something between the lines here.
What you were saying is exactly what happened to Chappelle.
Oh.
The Chappelle show.
Yeah.
They loved him. He's this wild dude, and then all of a sudden, this is too wild. This is becoming really successful.
We
can change you. They wanted him to stop saying the N-word. They wanted to stop a bunch of different things on the show.
And we'll give you all this money if you roll over.
They gave him literally the devil's deal. We're going to give you $50 million, and this is what you're going to get. And he's like, no, I quit. I quit everything, and I'm going to go to Africa. I'm going to hang out in Africa for a while, and I'm going to quit stand-up for 10 years and come back and still be the best.
That is so the right move.
Oh, my God. Well, look, he's a legend now, but that's really him. If you're around him, he's an artist in like the truest sense of the word.
Absolutely.
But the truth is, Dave Chappelle didn't turn down $50 million. He turned down the strings attached that would turn him into a puppet. Because here's the truth. What Comedy Central wanted from Dave Chappelle is exactly what new musicians complain about with record labels. It's that when these companies slip you these huge deals, what they want in exchange is the very brand and intellectual property that the artist is. What Comedy Central would buy in exchange for that $50 million to Dave Chappelle could potentially make them $500 million. And it's because the fine print on these predatory contracts gives them control over what the shows are, how they're advertised and distributed, and even how the costs are recovered from the artist in case of a loss. And in the end, they even end up owning the very IP of the artist, which basically means you give up a part of yourself to these companies forever. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like a deal with the devil, as Joe Rogan put it, letting him own a piece of you forever. But what's most revolting to me is how these predatory deals are offered to artists when they're most vulnerable, when they're broke, in a rough patch in their life, or just desperately looking for their first foot in the door.
And that's how I got with Comedy Central. I signed a contract, but I signed the contract the way that a 28-year-old expectant father that was broke signs a contract. I was desperate, I needed a way out, and it wasn't good money and it wasn't good circumstances, but what else am I gonna do, I said. And all these white people sitting at that table told me, trust us, Dave, it's a good contract. And I looked around the table and they all seemed to agree it was a good contract. But what if it was like that game of three-card Monte? What if they were all friends and I didn't know it? People think I made a lot of money for Chappelle's show. When I left that show, I never got paid. They didn't have to pay me because I signed the contract. But is that right? I found out that these people were streaming my work and they never had to ask me or they never had to tell me. Perfectly legal because I signed the contract. But is that right? I didn't think so either. I believe that they gave me a raw deal because this industry is a monster.
But what happened when Dave Chappelle challenged this system? The corporate overlords in the entertainment industry tried to break him, then isolate him, and then tried to get away with just labeling him crazy.
You're hearing on the news things like he's gone crazy, which that doesn't sound right, you know? And
maybe I know stuff people don't want me to talk about, so we're gonna want other people to believe, so they'll call me crazy. But it was a weird thing to get called crazy. At first it was scary, and then now I feel like it's liberating. Like, I feel free, like I can just say what I want to do. They already call me crazy. Ain't no weak people talking to you. So what is happening in Hollywood? Nobody knows. The worst thing to call somebody is crazy, is dismissive. I don't understand this person, so they're crazy. That's bull. These people are not crazy. They're strong people. Maybe the environment is a little sick.
And I think Dave Chappelle knew that by accepting the devil's deal, he would allow his own wings to be clipped as a comedian. He was being put inside a golden cage, which other comedians envy from the outside, but one he could never escape. Dave was trading control and ownership of his name and craft in exchange for a limited and platform-dependent version of success. And to me, that just doesn't sound like the free and rebellious spirit that Dave Chappelle is. He did that for a season or two, then realized he could not allow himself to be so neutered like this. He would rather be wild and hungry than well-fed and tamed. So he called it quits, went to Africa, and disappeared from the comedy scene for a whole decade.
He's also gone through a lot of bullshit in his career with, the leaving the Chappelle show and, abandoning $50 million and going to Africa and really understanding what his real motivation were. He was caught up in that world where they were trying to change him and commercialize his television show, and he handled it as good as anybody that's ever handled it.
Yeah.
He handled fame and temptation, I think, better than anyone I've ever heard of. He just said, you, and he just went away. He went away and then didn't do gigs for years. People don't understand. He would show up and do stand-up places, but he wouldn't book anything. So, he wasn't getting paid. He did stand-up. Dave Chappelle did stand-up in the park in Seattle. He brought a little amplifier and a microphone, set up, and just started doing stand-up, and people just gathered around.
And to him, that must have felt freer than any corporate sword hanging over his head, forcing him to meet content quotas, booking numbers, and take creative direction from a boss. And I'm sure Joe Rogan understands where Dave Chappelle was coming from, because Joe himself explicitly told Spotify that if he were to make an exclusivity deal with them for his podcast, he would not allow them any editorial control over its content. In Dave's case, though, it took him 10 whole years to make a comeback big enough that he no longer needed those corporate overlords at places like Comedy Central or Netflix, because for him, that would just mean trading one master for another.
When I quit the show, all my friends would say, well, f*** them, Dave. Why don't you just do Chappelle's show at another network? Yeah. And why doesn't a slave run from one plantation to another plantation? Because the master over there might be nicer.
And if he's drawing a comparison as dark as slavery, that tells you something. The slaves tilled the land and picked the cotton, but it's the oppressive system that skimmed all the profits from the top. But some people just aren't meant to be mindless cogs in a system. They need to be able to feel a sense of agency and a sense of being a rebel for a cause. For Dave Chappelle, comedy is the weapon to be able to call out power. I mean, think about it. Back in the day, you'd have the king bring out jesters to entertain him. But if the jester dared mock the king instead, he knew he'd lose his head fast. I think that's kind of what's carried over even to the modern scene of comedy. If you can serve to distract the masses and be a vehicle for the establishment message, you're rewarded lavishly. But if you dare use comedy to speak truth to power or rebel against the system, you're the one man that the entire machine wants to crush. And in the case of Dave, people like Katt Williams have been trying to warn you about it for a long time.
Dave Chappelle was decapitated in front of us. You're talking about somebody who has a wife and children, 5 children, and lives on a farm, doesn't live here in Hollywood. You saying you convinced people that person was an insane crackhead, and he hasn't been on movies and TV for 8 years? Is that correct? Okay, then don't tell me about what you want to tell me about. I just watched you decapitate the king in front of me, and then act like he's supposed to catch up and be a regular comedian like everybody else. But no. Then when he made $500 million, they said even though his contract said he should get half of it, they said he made too much for the contract to be valid, so we'll offer you 10% of what you made. You mean he made $500 million and they offered him 50? Yes. And he said, what do you think my fans are going to say when they find out you offered me 10% of what I made you? And they said, your fans will believe that you're a crazy crackhead by the time you get home.
But what happened in the end? Dave Chappelle became larger than the system that tried to chain him down. And that heroic life arc alone cements him as one of the greatest names to have come out of comedy. But Dave has been warning you about something much more sinister about how the industry tries to emasculate men under the garb of comedy. So watch this lost clip of him on Oprah where he says the quiet part out loud, and subscribe to Elites Exposed for more.